Okay, so we've put the retainer back in, and we're going to put our little circlip back in here. We'll just start it on one side. And just kind of push it down until it snaps into place. Like so. Give it a little twist to make sure it's in the groove. And then we will just want to give a quick wipe inside the housing to make sure that there's no dirt or dust trapped in there. Now if you had one of those little air duster cans, that would be a good time to spray that out. And we've cleaned our internal optics on the lens, so we'll just go ahead, I don't drop it on the floor, and we'll go ahead and screw this back together. And put the rear on. There we go. And we'll put our little spacer ring on there. And we should be able to drop it in the housing now. And then we have to line it up properly. And there is a small pin inside the housing that we have to line up with this slot here. So we just, we'll put the spacer in there, it'll be a little bit easier. Drop it in place and hope it lines up. And it did not line up. So pop it back out, and this can take 2 or 3 tries. May be easier if you remove the rear of the lens, but either way it's a trick. You can try to sort of eyeball it and line it up in there like that. Okay, and it looks like we've got it in. Now it's catching on something here. Now, as I said, it would probably be easier if we just removed the rear of the lens. So we'll go ahead and do that. 4 screws. Now, if anybody happens to know where I can get a replacement aperture for this aperture leaf for this lens, let me know, because I would like to get this lens functioning the way it should, but I can't without the shutter. Now, I want to be careful here. This is our tab here for the aperture adjustment, and if you see here, there's a little tiny ball stuck onto there with a dab of grease. You do not want to lose that, because that's what gives you your click 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 whenever you adjust your aperture, which isn't going to be of any use on this lens at this point, but anyway, we don't want to lose it anyway, because I hope to someday get this thing back to the way it's actually supposed to be. Okay, so now we can just simply line up the pin with that slot. And it's in. And now we put our retaining ring back on. And you want to make sure that you don't cross thread it, so back it off a little bit until you can feel it drop into the threads, and then just simply screw it in. Okay, and that's in. And then we want to reassemble the rear of the lens. So we'll take our aperture adjustment and drop it down, and there's this little tab on here. It has a small slot. It goes onto the tab on the main lens assembly. And then we want to get this little ball back in that hole right there. And then this will go on here, and the two pins down. And slide it in like that. And then our rear housing simply just goes on like this. Just have to make sure that this little tab here is in the actuator slot inside the lens. Now I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not, but you have to make sure that that is in that slot, and that is where I'm assuming that the pin came out from, and probably as the lens was being jostled around in the camera case or something, that it probably somehow worked its way out of there. But we just drop that in there like that, line up the holes, and reinstall the screws. And we don't want to tighten them down just yet. We want to make sure they're all in and lined up first, and then just snug them down. The other thing that I've noticed on here is that this lens appears to have been worked on at some time before, because the screws are not really, they're slightly stripped out, and there's a little scratch mark on the back by that screw, and the face ring here also has a couple nicks around the outside of it where it looks like it was possibly opened at some point in time. But this lens could have had a problem before. Now this was my dad's camera, so I'll have to ask him to see if he remembers if he ever had it in for repairs. But okay, so that's on. Now we've got to put the front trim ring on. Easier said than done, but you get the idea. I'm going to make sure not to rub the glass, because even though you're working on the lens, you still want as little oils or anything on the glass itself as possible. And then I'll just take my little adapter that I made and snug that back down again. But so now we have a perfectly working, well, not perfectly working, but at least perfectly focusing lens. And why did the focus just jam there? I wonder if that didn't sound too good. Wonder if that little pin got caught in the helicals. It's interesting. Anyway, I'll have to look into that later. But there we go. That is the disassembly and reassembly of a manual SLR lens. And unfortunately, we were not able to repair it, but it still has the potential for repair. I just have to somehow find aperture shutter leaves for it. Again, if anybody knows where to find them, or if they have a damaged lens that they would be willing to part with, let me know. This is a auto top core lens. It's a 58mm 1.4 lens for a Beseler Topcon camera. It has an exact amount on it. If anybody has one of these lenses that is severely damaged, as in the housing or something, but it still has a good aperture, or even just a sticky aperture that they would want to part with, let me know, and we'll see if we could work something out. But again, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.